What's up, boxing fans? This is TBE Boxing back at you again. Today's topic: Errol Spence Clout chased Canelo and was dismissed. With options now limited, who does he fight next? Let's chop it up and see what it's all about.
Got the money for minutes, pretty bitch, gotta show me titties. This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? That life you for riches, huh? That life you for riches, huh? Pretty bitch, show me titties, huh? And I got the glazzy run up on me, I'ma make you get it. I'ma make you get it.
Okay, boxing fans, let's talk some boxing today. So, we're gonna talk about the Errol Spence situation, with vis-a-vis Canelo, Terrence Crawford, and who is he gonna fight next now that his attempt to use Canelo's name, in avoiding the Crawford fight. What's next for Errol Spence? Okay. So as you all know, recently Errol Spence was attempting to use Canelo Alvarez's name, in a way to more or less stop people talking about him fighting Terrence Crawford. It failed miserably, and he was summarily dismissed by Canelo Alvarez. And so now there's some question as to who Errol Spence is going to fight next if he's not going to fight Terrence Crawford. Now, I'm not sure. Well, I am sure that he doesn't want to fight Terrence Crawford. But there's a big question as to why that is. At the end of the day, Terrence Crawford would be his biggest fights to date. Okay, he's making the most money he'd ever make. Okay, and instead of making that fight, he's talking about, Terrence Crawford needs to take a 60-40, 70-30, or whatever they can give him, or whatever they decide to give him. Okay, in terms of the fight. Now, the reality of the situation is this. Without Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence cannot make as much money as he, ordinarily would be able to. In his fight against Porter, Danny Garcia, and Mikey Garcia, he made decent money. The biggest money he made was against Mikey Garcia, because Mikey Garcia bought his fan base, okay, and so he made a lot of money in that fight. And the proof is in the pudding, because in his unification fight against Porter, he didn't make as much money as he made against Mikey Garcia. In his defense against Danny Garcia, he didn't make as much money as he made in the Porter fight. Okay? So we see that in the last couple of fights, his money has been going down, not up, actually. Okay, so the biggest money he made, which was $8 million, was in the Mikey Garcia fight. Okay, and he got that in that fight. I believe the guarantee for that fight was his guaranteed money for that fight was $1.2 million. Okay, with the gate, the live gate, because they had live gate back then, he made another maybe 1.8 million. Okay, so that made it about $3 million between his guarantee and the live gate, and then he made another $4 or $5 million from the pay-per-view sales, which he got 60% of the pay-per-view sales in that fight. So altogether, he made about $8 million, which was his highest payout so far in his whole career. Okay, now he could make triple that against Crawford. Okay, so why wouldn't he want to make the Crawford fight? Okay, now Mikey Garcia made the same amount of money as Errol Spence in that fight. Okay, they both made around $8 million. So, as a matter of fact, and in the Porter fight, his guarantee, I believe, was the same $1.2 million, and then he made some money from the gate, which made it about $2 million, and he made about $4 million from the pay-per-view in that fight. Okay, so he didn't make as much. He made about that fight. He made about $6 million. Like I said, in the Mikey Garcia fight, he made about $8 million. Okay, and so again, the reason why he made $8 million is not necessarily because of him himself. I mean, he does have a following, but the following, you know, was the mixture of the Mikey Garcia following and his following, and so, you know, the Mexicans, and so he got like $8 million. That's why he got so much money in that fight. So we see why, you know, he's talking about, you know, maybe fighting Canelo, because you know, Canelo, I mean, Canelo is getting like $15 million per fight guaranteed, and then whatever else he can make from pay-per-view. In his last fight, for example, Canelo made his usual $15 million, and then from the pay-per-view and everything else, he made another $20 million. So his, you know, he made $35 million for his last fight, about $30 to $35 million. Okay, so this is what Canelo brings to the table. He has a big following. The whole country is behind him, and so when he makes pay-per-view fight, he has big numbers. So we can see why, you know, Errol Spence would want to fight Canelo, because that would probably bring in a lot more money than he can fight, you know, than he can make fighting, you know, just the guys in his weight class. But except that is for Terrence Crawford. Now, it's conceivable that a fight between Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford could do maybe close to 1 million pay-per-view. Okay, and the only reason for that, why that fight would do 1 million, is because of the two fighters. It's not because of Errol Spence. Okay, it's because the two of them combined. Because people really want to see that fight, so they're gonna pay the money to see that fight. In his fight against Mikey Garcia, the pay-per-view numbers were like 360,000, which was his highest numbers so far. And as we can see, he got paid, like I said, $8 million for that fight. Okay. Let's say that him and Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford were to fight. Let's say they bring in 1 million pay-per-view. We can see that, you know, and they split that 50-50. Okay. He got $5 million for the pay-per-view in the Mikey Garcia fight, and that was only 360,000 pay-per-view. So you can imagine how much money he would make if they was to get like a 800 to 900,000 pay-per-view between him and Terrence Crawford. His money would go up. His money would, you know, double or triple. So at the end of the day, that's a fight that, you know, that's the best fight that he could make at 147 pounds with the most money. Okay, so I mean, we can look at some numbers, and we're gonna do that. But let's take a look at what happened recently when and before we even get to that, we gotta talk about this Terrence Crawford thing, because again, Terrence Crawford is the fight that will make Errol Spence the most money, but he's doing everything in his power to throw that fight out the window for some reason. Okay, talking about 60-40 and 70-30. I mean, now he can't make as much money against any other fighter as he can against Terrence Crawford, but he doesn't want to pay Terrence Crawford 50-50. Okay, he doesn't want it to be 50-50, even though it's Terrence Crawford's name and him combined that's going to bring all that money. So it's a natural 50-50 fight, okay, because he can't make that money anywhere else except in some fantasy fight with Canelo Alvarez. And we know that fight is not going to happen, and the reason for that is that Canelo doesn't really want to fight. He doesn't really need Errol Spence. He's making his money, regardless of Errol Spence. He has the whole country behind him. He's making his guaranteed pay. He doesn't really need Errol Spence at all to make any money. Okay, so let's listen to what happened when Errol Spence went to the Canelo fight and what he said. Check this out.
Now, I follow you on social media, like a lot of people do, and there was a graphic that was thrown up recently of all the top welterweights. And you commented like, look, what are we doing here? I beat several of the guys on this graphic. Can we be done with everybody else but Terrence Crawford? Can we just do Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford?
I mean, that could happen. We got to see how it go. But, you know, like I said, I can move up to 160 and fight Canelo Alvarez.
Congratulations. Back here, way back, you have Zimmerman Fight News. Did you see Errol Spence tonight at the fight? And what about fighting him back at Cowboy Stadium in Dallas next year?
Sí, sí, lo vi. La verdad que, pues obviamente, agradecido de que estén aquí. Pues ahorita tenemos otras metas, ¿no? Tenemos otras metas a corto plazo, que es ganar los títulos en las 168 libras y pues más adelante veremos.
Yes, I did saw him. I'm very grateful that he was here, but reality is that we have other goals right now. We have the goals of the 168-pound titles.
So there it is. So Canelo's not interested. Like I said, he doesn't need Errol Spence. He's making his money, and you know, he's at 168 pounds, and he's not gonna come down to 160 to fight Errol Spence. He's gonna make his money regardless, so he doesn't really need Errol Spence. But here it is, and as you can see in that clip, Errol Spence didn't call out Canelo. He didn't go in the ring and say he wants a Canelo fight. When they asked him about Terrence Crawford, he basically switched the conversation to Canelo. So it was just a clout chasing move, basically, to use Canelo's name to stop people talking about him fighting Terrence Crawford. And we saw that play out, you know, right there live. I mean, he said, I can move up and fight Canelo at 160, and then he laughed. So he didn't say, I'm going to move up and fight Canelo at 160, or tell Canelo I want to fight him at 160. I'm ready to fight him at 100. He didn't say anything like that, okay? He just basically said he can move up. Yeah, he could move up, but is he going to move up? And as we can see, Canelo is not really interested in that fight. So the fight, the natural fight for Errol Spence is Terrence Crawford at 147 pounds. He doesn't need to go to 160 to make the kind of money that he wants to make, okay? He could make it 147 with Terrence Crawford, but he doesn't want to take that fight for some reason. I mean, you know, this fight, you know, Terrence Crawford came out 3 years ago. He came up to 147 and called out all the champions, including Errol Spence. And they have ducked him ever since. And, you know, Errol Spence has been ducking him for 3 years now. So, I mean, we're going to lay this whole thing out, because if we look at the whole progression of the history of the thing, let's take a look at that, okay? Hold on. Let's take a look at the whole progression.
Doesn't fight anyone. Should Earl give him a shot?
Who? What now?
He says if Crawford doesn't fight anyone, should Earl give him a shot?
Shot of what? I mean, he still got other guys he's gonna fight or whatever. I mean, his fight schedule may be planned out. You know what I'm saying? Like, after this one, we got another big one. We want to get the 3 belts, or whatever the case may be. But hey, listen, man, I think that fight will possibly happen. But I think that if you think about it like this, Errol can fight Keith Thurman, Sean Porter. He can fight Pacquiao. He can fight Danny Garcia. He can fight Ugas. He can fight all these guys. So his legacy has nothing to do with fighting Terrence Crawford.
There you go. So as you can see, the duck plan was laid out a long time ago. Okay, you see all the names that he mentioned: Ugas, Thurman, Manny Pacquiao. Okay, and then he said that, you know, that was Derek James. For those of you that don't know, that's Errol Spence's trainer. And he said basically that Errol Spence's legacy doesn't depend on fighting Terrence Crawford. So you can see from a while back, this has been the plan. There was never any plan to fight Terrence Crawford. Okay, so when Errol Spence told Terrence Crawford to go get a belt and come back and he'll fight him, that was never going to happen. Okay, that was just to take the pressure off him, because people were asking for that fight like 3 years ago. So we saw Derek James lay out the complete duck plan. Okay, he reeled off a list of names that Errol was supposed to fight: Ugas, Thurman, Manny, Porter, Garcia, and this is how it's been progressing so far. And, you know, they're basically sticking to that duck plan that they laid out, you know, years ago. Okay. So, you remember when Errol Spence and, you know, ran up on, actually, Terrence Crawford ran up on Errol Spence and they were talking. Let's take a look at that, and we're going to see that how the duck plan has been laid out, okay? Give me 1 second. Let me pull that up for you.
Sure I met Al Haymon. I met Al Haymon.
I know.
Personally.
So have I.
What do you say? Okay.
Can we get both of them in the ring? Can we get both of them in the ring?
He said, I'm fighting Mikey. Then I might fight Sean Porter, Keith Thurman.
So he didn't mention Terrence, huh?
He didn't.
The smartest thing.
Okay. So you saw that. So they were talking about, you know, what was the plan in terms of who Errol Spence is going to fight. Just like how Derek James laid it out. You hear Errol Spence laying it out. And he was talking about his advisor, Al Haymon, and who they were going to fight next. And you saw that, you know, he mentioned Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter, you know, just like it's basically the same duck plan. So, and just to confirm it's a duck plan, Terrence Crawford asked him, well, he didn't mention my name, huh? He didn't mention Terrence, huh? And what did Errol Spence say? He said, no, he didn't. So there it is. That was the confirmation right there that they had no plans of fighting Terrence Crawford. Okay, I mean, this is what it is. The whole plan was laid out in advance, and Terrence Crawford's name is nowhere in that plan. And we just saw Errol Spence confirm that. Okay? I mean, let's listen to it again.
Sure
I met Al Haymon.
Sam Watts?
I met Al Haymon.
I know.
Personally.
So have I.
What do you say? Okay.
Can we get both of them in the ring? Can we get both of them in the ring?
He said, I'm fighting Mikey. Then I might fight Sean Porter, Keith Thurman.
So he didn't mention Terrence, huh?
He didn't.
The smartest thing you could.
There we go. So he said, what did he say? What did he say? And Errol Spence said, what do you mean what he said? And then he laid out the duck plan, and he said, you didn't mention Terrence, and he said, no. So we can see that this is an ongoing plan. It's been planned way in advance, and these guys have no intention of fighting Terrence Crawford, okay? So, you know, a lot of people, you know, now I've been talking about this for a while now when I realized the plan, okay? You know, and I started talking about it, and, you know, people been saying, oh, I'm this, or I'm hating on Spence, this, that, whatever. And, you know, I'm not the only one talking about it. A couple other people have been talking about it, about him ducking Terrence Crawford. And we can see that, you know, he's basically confirming it, that they're ducking Terrence Crawford. And they've been doing that for a while. Like I said, this is a duck plan that was laid out a long time ago. Okay? And they're continuing with the plan. So now that, you know, we fast forward to, 2021 almost now. We're in 2020, but it's almost 2021. And that duck plan is still in effect. And so, a lot of people are getting hip to the plan now, because it's been 3 years since Crawford has been calling Errol Spence out. And so we saw, recently that Tim Bradley and Andre Ward, basically exposed the plan to, the masses, on their platform on ESPN. Okay. And so, now we know, that this plan is actually in effect, and it's continuing as we speak. Okay. And let's play the clip of what Tim Bradley had to say about the plan. Give me 1 second.
Correct me if I'm wrong, or I think he's just wants to get the money, and then he wants to lead the game. That's it. He has no intentions on fighting Terrence Crawford. And I think that even if Terrence Crawford was to jump ship and to go over there to PBC, I still don't see the fight happening over there. And I stand by that until they actually sign and fight. Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. I don't see it happening. Why would you go up north and face Canelo, but you won't face Terrence Crawford in the same weight class as you?
Thank you.
That's a money thing for him. I think that Spence is at a point now, and correct me if I'm wrong, or I think he's just wants to get the money, and then he wants to lead the game. That's it. He has no intentions on fighting Terrence Crawford. And I think that even if Terrence Crawford was to jump ship and to go over there to PBC, I still don't see the fight happening over there. And I stand by that until they actually sign and fight. Now,
okay, so there it is. So Tim Bradley, basically exposed the duck plan, okay, as I've been talking about it for a while now. And so now, we have people like Tim Bradley, Andre Ward, talking about, what's going on with Errol Spence and his continuous ducking of Terrence Crawford, okay? So, as Tim Bradley said, I don't really think that, people talking about, the main talking point and the main narrative a lot of these guys are running, okay, is that, he needs to come to PBC for the fight to happen. No, I don't believe it's going to happen if you come to PBC, okay? I don't see it happening, okay? I mean, like I said, the plan's been laid out, and even if Terrence Crawford was to come to PBC, the fight probably would never happen, okay? Because he doesn't want to fight. Errol Spence does not want to fight Terrence Crawford, okay? And, even though it's the biggest money fight that he could ever, that he could make, he still doesn't want to make the fight. And, he's coming up with all kind of reasons, he's trying to use Canelo, he's trying to, make up all kind of different reasons why this fight shouldn't happen. The first they were saying that Terrence Crawford didn't fight anybody, you need to fight this guy, you need to fight that guy, you know what I mean? And, that, now they're saying he got to accept 70-30 or whatever they decide to give him in the fight. So all of those different things that we see happening, okay, is just duck moves, okay? Now, did Errol Spence, remember when Errol Spence was going to fight Sean Porter? And he said Sean Porter couldn't, basically something to the effect that Sean Porter couldn't, fill up a picnic or something like that. Basically saying that he was the pay-per-view star and that, Sean Porter had no following, basically, okay? So, but did he come out and say that Sean Porter had to accept 60% or 70-30 or whatever he can give Sean Porter? No. In that fight, they both made $2 million for that fight, and that's a unification fight. Okay, so that was a unification fight between him and Sean Porter, and the pay-per-view numbers was about 300,000 or so. Okay, less than what he. In other words, those numbers were less than the Danny Garcia fight. So the fight with him and not Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia. The fight with him and Mikey Garcia was 360,000 pay-per-views. With Porter, it was about 300,000. Okay, so again, you see that the draw in that fight between him and Danny Garcia was the fact that he was fighting Mikey Garcia. Was the fact that he was fighting Mikey Garcia, and Mikey Garcia brought his own crowd to that fight, the Mexicans to that fight. So that's why he made so much money. That's why that's his biggest money-making fight so far. And I mean, that wasn't a unification fight. That was just a Mikey Garcia moving up and challenging him. So that was a defense, okay? But in his unification against Porter, he made less money than he made it with Mikey Garcia. So his fan base, and Porter's fan base couldn't equal the fan base of him and Mikey Garcia. So we see that what made the difference was Mikey Garcia and his fan base in that fight. This is why Errol Spence made so much money in that fight. Okay, $8 million. Okay, so in the Porter fight again, he made like about $6 million after everything was added up, but the guarantee was $2 million. Okay, and Porter made $2 million guarantee. So you didn't hear him out there saying that Porter, have to take 70-30 or whatever you can give him. You didn't hear him say that with Mikey Garcia. He didn't say that with Lamar Peterson. He didn't say that with anybody else that he fought. He didn't even say that against Carlos Ocampo, who nobody ever heard of. Okay? As a matter of fact, that fight, they both got 50-50 in that fight in terms of the pay-per-view. Okay? So, but with Terrence Crawford, the guy who's going to bring the most money that he's ever seen in a fight, Okay, I just think of the logic of this. Terrence Crawford is the guy that's going to bring the most money in the fight that Errol Spence has ever made. That's going to be close to $1 million or more pay-per-view. But he's telling that guy that he has to take 70-30. And people out there are riding with that. I mean, it's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. And let's not forget another thing. These are guys out there talking this 70-30 talk, and and all this, these LDBC guys, Phantom Boxing, Blue Blood Sports, all these guys saying that, Terrence Crawford is not, all these guys are supposed to be pro-black, okay? These are pro-black, LDBC, they're supposed to be, all of them supposed to be pro-black, but they want to freeze out another black guy who can bring the most money to the table with Errol Spence, okay? They want to freeze him out, and they want Errol Spence to go up and challenge Canelo, okay? I mean, when you think about this whole thing, man, these guys are out of their minds, okay? But, this is the kind of plantation, mentality that we are seeing, okay? And so, we're seeing it play out, it never fails. I mean, this is what's going on right now in boxing. These guys are turning boxing into a laughing stock. They're making Errol Spence look like a laughing stock, okay? He's up there trying to cloud chase Canelo's name, getting dismissed by Canelo, and making Canelo look like a boss and himself looking like a peon. I mean, it's ridiculous. Instead of making the fight with his brother, Terrence Crawford, and both of them make good money and split the pot 50-50, they're trying to diss Terrence Crawford. They're trying to belittle him, belittle his career. And these are all guys who are supposed to be pro-black, okay? So this is what's going on. So anyway, like I said, the duck plan has been laid out, okay, and we saw Tim Bradley just confirm it, okay. I've been saying it, and a lot of people have been saying it, and it is what it is, man. At this point, like I keep saying, the only way we're gonna get this fight between Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence is that we're going to have to drag Errol Spence into the ring against Terrence Crawford, because if we don't do that, the fight is never going to happen, okay? And, I want to let's take a look at some of our,
Is the Spence you fought last September at Staples, would that guy beat Crawford, or from what you...
Let's take a look, and this is why the fight is not going to happen, okay? Unless we drag him into the ring. So let's take a look at what, Sean Porter said about the fight with Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence.
Is the Spence you fought last September at Staples, would that guy beat Crawford, or from what you know?
That guy was very good. Mm-hmm. He was good to the point where the last round, we came in, we touched gloves. Normally it just touch gloves and you fight, but I touched gloves with him and I said, good shit, boy, because the work was that good. And the night was that good and that competitive, and I wanted it, and I could tell that he wanted it too. Does that fighter beat Terrence Crawford? That fighter was strong. That fighter was very good. I saw some holes. I saw that I was a step ahead of him a majority of that fight, and saying that, no, I don't think that fighter can beat Terrence Crawford. But I've already said that in a match, I don't think Errol Spence could beat Terrence Crawford. I think that Terrence wins that fight. I think he's got more in his arsenal.
There it is. So that's Sean Porter, who's supposedly going to fight Crawford. He claims that he want to fight Crawford, but he still hasn't exercised the mandatory yet. But this is what he had to say, okay? So, all of this talk about Crawford having fought anybody, he hasn't fought in good competition. Well, if that's the case, then it should be easier for you to beat him, right? I mean, he's going to bring a lot of money to the table. It's going to be the biggest fight you ever had at that weight. But he hasn't fought anybody. He is fighting, guys with weak resumes. So go ahead and take the big money fight against him and collect that bag. Why wouldn't you want to take the fight and collect the bag? You say he's not fighting anybody, but we all know that's a bunch of nonsense, okay? And, we saw there's Sean Porter telling you that, all this talk about Crawford haven't fighting anybody, this, that, and the other. It's all nonsense, because he's saying that he believed that Crawford can beat Spence and that Spence has no chance against him, okay? And he's been saying that consistently, okay? So, again, this is why the duck plan was laid out, okay? Because they don't want to fight Terrence Crawford because no matter how much money is gonna make, the fight is gonna make, because they believe that Spence is gonna lose against Crawford, okay? And this is why the fight, you know, is they keep making excuses as to why the fight shouldn't happen, you know. And then, like I said, it's all at first he didn't fight anybody. I mean, how could you not fight anybody and be the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so here's a guy who hasn't fought anybody. He got the weakest resume in the welterweight division according to Derek James. Okay, Spence is the #1 guy, the big guy, but he's not the #1 pound for pound fighter. Everybody in the boxing community is rating Terrence Crawford as #1 pound for pound fighter in the world, but he isn't fighting anybody. How is that possible? What is he, a magician? So he must be a magician then, because if only a magician could pull something like that off, okay? You know what I mean? So you know, people gotta really wake up and smell the coffee, okay? We gotta stop the nonsense, okay? They need to make this fight because it's the biggest fight in boxing right now, and both of these guys are gonna make money. I mean, somebody gotta win and somebody gotta lose. That's just the way it plays. But I mean, there's no shame in Spence losing to Crawford or Crawford losing to Spence. You know what I mean? There was no shame when Tommy Hearns lost to Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, it was a great fight. The fight went down in the history. It's one of the biggest fights in history, and we still talk about that fight today. You know what I mean? We call them, you know, Tommy Hearns, Marvin Hagler, Roberto Duran, you know, Sugar Ray, the Fab Four. And we're still talking about these guys up to this day. These guys, you know, are forever etched in the history of the sport. Okay, so this fight needs to be made between Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence for legacy reasons, if not just for the money. Okay, but it's going to be money involved as well. So I mean, the fight needs to be made. But these guys don't want to make this fight. You know what I mean? They're worried about Errol Spence losing, and probably they're worried about him getting stopped by Terrence Crawford. But I mean, we don't know who's going to win the fight. I mean, we can say Terrence Crawford is going to win, or we can say Errol Spence is going to win. But the only way we really going to know is for the fight to happen, and that the fight needs to happen because this is what the fans want. Okay, the fans been demanding this fight now for years, and fans are still not getting the fight because of so-called business or politics or whatever. You know, it's the business. They talk, you know, the reason why he's not fighting why Errol Spence is not fighting Crawford is the business. He's making business moves. But these same guys that say that, you know, Blue Blood Sports and the fans of the world, you know, the LDBC, all these guys, so-called pro-black guys, you know, when these guys are out there criticizing Canelo Alvarez for making the move that he's making. They're saying he's ducking Jamal Charlo. Errol Spence is not fighting Terrence Crawford, but his business move. Canelo is not fighting Jamal Charlo, but he's ducking. Okay, you see the difference? Okay, when Canelo doesn't fight somebody, he's ducking. When Errol Spence doesn't fight somebody, he's making business moves. He's making chess moves. Okay, it's business. You know, he got to Errol Spence. Terrence Crawford got to recognize the business, but they can't recognize the business when Canelo makes his moves. Okay, he's ducking. So you know, it's just nonsense. These guys are talking, and you know, we gotta expose it for what it is. You know, but like I said, the way these guys talk is just, you know, that plantation mentality. Okay, it's a Negro mentality that these guys have. You know, when it comes to boxing, and they're bringing that Negro mentality and plantation mentality into boxing. Okay, I mean, not to say that it wasn't there already, because you know we know what boxing is all about. You know what I mean? But you have to, you gotta understand the society that we live in. Okay, and so it is what it is. You know what I mean? We look at you know the society that we live in, and we see that it's no surprise that these guys are bringing this kind of mentality to the boxing game, because it is what it is. Okay, so but you know, at the end of the day, we gotta try to get rid of that kind of mentality. Okay, not add to it. Okay, not, you know, bring it into more prominence. We got to try to get rid of that. You know what I mean? And let's make this fight between Crawford and Spence because it's a win-win for both guys. It doesn't matter who win or lose the fight, okay? Both guys are going to win, okay? Financially, legacy-wise, and the fans are going to win if this fight happens. But again, you know, we're not seeing this fight happen because of all these various so-called reasons. But, you know, let's take a look at
doesn't fight anyone.
Errol Spence's career earnings and see, you know, look at this. We see that Alejandro Barrera, he made $250,000. Chris Algieri, $400,000. Leonard Bundu, $400,000. Kell Brook, he made $1.2 million and 50% of the pay-per-view. Lamont Peterson, $1.2 million and 50% of the pay-per-view. Carlos Ocampo, $1.2 million and 50% of the pay-per-view. Mikey Garcia, $1.2 million and 60% of the pay-per-view. Now, in the Mikey Garcia fight, like I said, this is the guarantee. If you add the live gate to that, that makes it like $3 million, okay, instead of 1.2. And then you add the pay-per-view, and which is another $5 million. That made about $8 million that he made, okay. So with Sean Porter, he made $1.25 million and 60% of the pay-per-view, which was about another $4 million. So he made about $5 to $6 million, close to $6 million in that fight. So he made less than he made in the Mikey Garcia fight, okay? Even though his guarantee was higher. In the Danny Garcia fight, the guarantee is $1.5 million, okay? 60% of the pay-per-view. Now, we know that there's no live gate in this fight, so with the 60% of the pay-per-view is only $250,000, which is less than the Porter fight and the Mikey Garcia fight. So we can probably safely say that with no gate and the pay-per-view, he probably made about $4 to $5 million for the Danny Garcia fight. And Danny Garcia probably made about $3 to $4 million, okay? Somewhere around it, $2, $3, $4 million. Maybe about 3.5, 4. Because in this fight, in the Danny Garcia fight, they were looking to make, let's take a look at what they expected to make in the Danny Garcia fight in terms of pay-per-view. We know that the pay-per-view is only 250,000 pay-per-view, even though these LDBC guys out there talking about 300,000 and 400,000. I mean, these guys are, you know, just making shit up as they go along. But let's take a look at the actual numbers, okay? Let's take a look at what they expected to make in this fight. So here they said this pay-per-view is expected to do around 600 to 750,000 pay-per-view buyers, which will ensure both Danny Garcia and Errol Spence clear around $8 million to $10 million, depending on the pay-per-view numbers. Okay. So you see there. So they didn't make anywhere close to that. They didn't even make half that. The numbers weren't even half of 600,000 or 750,000. It was only 250,000. So that means that, you know, like I said, I just explained to you, they probably made about 4, maybe 3.5 for Danny Garcia to 4, and maybe $5 million for Spence, if that much, because as we can see, the numbers weren't even half. So you can cut that half from that $10 million in half to 5 for Spence, and then around 4 or 3.5 for Danny Garcia. It's probably less than 5 for Spence, because like I said, the numbers weren't the numbers did not reach anywhere near what they expected the fight to be. Okay, so there it is. Okay, and up here you can see that, you know, his biggest career was $8 million for the Mikey Garcia fight. So the numbers, you know, the pay-per-view numbers were disappointing, to say the least, from what, from what they actually expected to make, which is 600,000 to 750,000 pay-per-view buys. So that it didn't come nowhere close to that. Okay, so if we look at some more numbers here, we thought this is the Sean Porter fight. Okay, so here we see, according to Forbes here, you know, like again here, $8 million for the Mikey Garcia fight. $3 million came from his purse, which is the, you know, the 1.2 million guarantee, and the live gate, and the rest came from the 260,000 pay-per-view buys. You know, so like I said, in the fight before that, he made $1.2 million, and when he took the belt from Brook, he made $1.22 million. Okay, now here we're looking at Porter's numbers, and this is important because here he said that Porter made a career high of $1.2 million for that fight against Ugas. Okay, is a career high purse. Okay, before then he made $1 million in his title win against Danny Garcia. Okay, so the reason that this is important is because, you know, we saw that Bob Arum said that he would give Sean Porter $1 million to fight Porter, and people started, you know, oh, well, $1 million is not enough. He should make more than that. Blah 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 blah, whatever. But here it is. We see that Porter is only made $1 million in his title win against Danny Garcia. Okay, $1 million. Okay, and then his career high again in his defense against Ugas was $1.25 million. But currently he doesn't even have a belt. So a $1 million payday is almost as much as his career high. So that's a lot of money for Sean Porter. And this is the same Sean Porter that Errol Spence said couldn't fill up a room. Okay, that he had no following. Okay, so against Crawford, I mean, they would probably make a pretty good pay-per-view, because of, again, that would be mostly because of Crawford, but not just because of Crawford, but also because of the combination of the two of them. So they'd probably make a pretty good payday if they were to fight. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, so this is, this is what it is. So we can see, that these politics that these guys are pushing and these narratives these guys are pushing, Sean Porter should make like at least $5 million, against Crawford. I mean, these guys are out of their minds. I mean, if the pay-per-view numbers come in, then maybe he might make that much, depending on, how they promote the fight and so forth and so on. But to say that, they should get offered $5 million guarantee, it doesn't make any sense, okay? Because as we see,
doesn't fight anyone.
Okay, look at the guarantee. This is Danny Garcia. Errol Spence, that guarantee against Danny Garcia is $1.5 million. Okay, 1.5. The money, the rest of the money is made from the pay-per-view, because usually it's made from the gate and the pay-per-view, but because there was no gate because of this COVID thing, so these guys are making a little bit less. Okay, but this is the guarantee. So how could Porter get $5 million guarantee against Crawford? I mean, this guy doesn't know anything about boxing or what's going on. Okay, I mean, they're just talking nonsense. Okay, at the end of the day, you know what I mean? So we really gotta, see this for what it is. Again, they're pushing Porter out there to fight Crawford because they don't want Spence to fight Crawford. They're saying that the best got to fight the best, but yet still, when Crawford say he wants to fight Spence, which is supposed to be the best at the weight division, all these guys don't want to see this fight happening for whatever reason. Okay, they got Spence in some kind of protection program. Okay, trying to protect him from Crawford, and all they're doing is actually protect him from making money. Okay, because he's gonna make the most money in his career against Terrence Crawford. So again, that fight needs to happen. And that would be the biggest money-making fight probably in boxing right now. Okay, unless we're talking about the AJ against Fury, Canelo, against somebody. Well, Canelo make money against anybody really. So he doesn't really need any particular fighter to make a lot of money. Excuse me, he makes his money regardless, okay, because he got a big following. He got the biggest following in boxing right now, probably. Okay, he got a whole country behind him, except maybe for AJ. And it is what it is. So all of this, talk by these LDBC guys and these Fannons and these blue blood sports people, You know, they need to stop the nonsense and let this fight, let the fans get the fight that they want. Okay, this fight is the biggest fight at the welterweight division right now, and this fight needs to be made. So the question is, if he doesn't fight Crawford, who's he gonna fight? Okay, who's Errol Spence gonna fight next if he doesn't fight Crawford? We just look at the numbers. Okay, we look at the numbers, and we see that he can't make any real money against anybody else except for Crawford, because if he was to fight, if he was to fight Porter again, what would the numbers be? There, people already saw the fight, okay, the first time, and so who is it? The same amount of people going to tune in for this fight again? So let's say the same amount of people tune in for the fight again, and it's a 300 pay-per-view fight, 300,000 pay-per-view fight, pay-per-view buys, okay. He's gonna make about $6 million. Maybe 5 if he's lucky, and that's if the numbers are the same. Okay, let's say who else can he fight? Ugas? How much money is he gonna make against Ugas? Okay, what's Ugas pay-per-view numbers? Is people gonna tune and see that fight? No. Okay, it's not gonna make any. That's not gonna be a big fight against Ugas, because you know it's not gonna be a big fight against Sean Porter. Okay. So, who's left? Okay, the only guy out there that Spence could make more money against, which is going to be close to the Crawford money, would be Manny Pacquiao. Okay, Pacquiao got a big following as well, and you know he got a whole country behind him, and so he can make money with whoever he fights. Okay, and so you know it's not going to be because of Spence following. It's going to be because of Manny's following. Because as we see, when we look at the number for Spence, his numbers peak at around maybe 200,000 to 250,000. And then you add the guy that he's gonna fighting, and it might come to about 300,000, like in the case with Mikey Garcia. Like I said, he made $8 million. Okay, 260,000 buys, and that was because of Mikey Garcia and what he brought to the table. So this talk about Spence being a pay-per-view star, you know, is all nonsense. Okay, he makes money according to the people that he fights with. Okay, which is why he wants to fight Manny Pacquiao. Why anybody wants to fight Manny Pacquiao? Because Manny Pacquiao is going to bring more to the table in terms of pay-per-view buys. Okay, we see that his highest pay-per-view buy was at 360,000 so far. Okay, So I mean, in his fight against Danny Garcia, we saw it was 250,000. So his numbers are going down, not up. Okay. So again, you know, 250,000 pay-per-view buy doesn't make you a pay-per-view star, okay? But if him and Crawford were to fight, I would think that fight would be close to 1 million pay-per-view or more. You know, at least 700,000 pay-per-view. So that's where the money is for him, you know, to fight, and that's a fight that's going to be easily made because Crawford actually wants to fight him, okay? And so it's a legacy fight as well as a big pay-per-view fight, probably 1 million pay-per-view. I mean, when we talk about pay-per-view stars, we got to talk about people like Mayweather who, you know, makes like 2 million. His pay-per-view buy against Manny Pacquiao was 4 million pay-per-view buys. Against McGregor, it was 4 million pay-per-view buys. You know, Mike Tyson, you know, when he used to fight pay-per-view, it was like 1.5 million, 2 million pay-per-view buys. I mean, when you have to be, those are pay-per-view stars, okay? Making 250,000 pay-per-view buys in a title fight, that doesn't make you a pay-per-view star, okay? You barely, you know, making the minimum, okay? So all this talk about being a pay-per-view star is just pure nonsense. And again, the only way that Spence is going to make a big pay-per-view close to 1 million is against somebody like Pacquiao or Crawford or maybe Canelo, if he was actually call out Canelo, which he's not doing. He's just using his name. So again, But why would you go up and cash out against Canelo, okay, when you can fight your own brother and make almost as much or probably just as much money, and that would be a legacy fight. You know, but these so-called pro-blacks, you know, LDBC guys and Blue Blood Sports and Shannon, they don't want him to do that. They don't want him to fight his brother. They as a matter of fact, they're going out there belittling Crawford, dissing his record. You know, I mean, they out there. These are LDBC guys and these Blue Blood Sports guys. They out there dissing Crawford's record, okay? And they're supposed to be pro-black, but the general community, the boxing community and the general sports community out there, you know, has Crawford as the #1 pound for pound, and they're not his brother, but they have him #1 pound for pound. But those are not his brothers that put him up there as #1 pound for pound. The people that's supposed to be his brothers and supposed to be pro-black, they're saying he hasn't fought anybody, you know, that he got the weakest record in the welterweight division and all this other talk that they're doing to try to belittle the guy's record, when, you know, everybody else out there who is not his brothers have him as #1 pound for pound in the world, even against Canelo, okay? They have him above Canelo, okay, as #1 pound for pound. The guy that Spence claimed he want to fight, Canelo. So, I mean, you know, man, when you think about this thing, man, it's ridiculous, you know? And so, you know, it is what it is. But hopefully, you know, hopefully we'll see this fight eventually, okay? And, you know, again, like I said, the only way we're going to see this fight is to drag Spence into the ring. And it looked like that's exactly what's going to have to happen. You know, this talk about 60-40, 7-30 is nonsense. The fight needs to be 50-50, okay? And the fight could be made, and we get to see the fight that we want to see. And Spence and Crawford get to make a whole ton of money in this in the process. And this, you know, it's a win-win for both guys. And that's why this fight needs to happen. So, you know, again, I don't think it's gonna happen myself. I doubt it, because again, you know, Spence looked like he doesn't want the fight, and you know, you got all these people out there trying to push against the fight, have Spence in some kind of protection program. But at the end of the day, you know, we'll see what happens, and it is what it is. That's all I have for right now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You know, hit the bell icon so you can get notified of my other videos when I put them out. This is TBE Boxing. That's all I have right now. I'm out.